Hi, I'm Veronica and welcome to my channel. Today I will talk about listening to your body. I will show you how you can do that in the context of the movement practice, but also more in general terms. So, we live in a world where we're quite disconnected from ourselves, from the needs of our bodies. And you might think that this is not the case, but just think for a moment how often a day, not even a week, does it happen to you that you feel like you want to pee and you're still holding it because you need to finish an email or because you're talking to someone and you don't want to just stop the conversation in the middle or anything like this. Or maybe you're feeling hungry, but then you look at the clock and you think, well, it's too early to have a lunch, and you don't eat. Or the other way around. We're doing it all the time. We just cut off from those messages that the body is sending us. And then no wonder then when it comes to time for any movement routine, whatever it will be for you, you also don't listen to what's going on inside you and instead do a routine. So, like a set exercise that somebody told you is the best for you, and you want to be very consistent, so you always do the same thing, regardless of how you're feeling. And I would encourage you to approach it completely differently and start with tuning in of what's going on and what your body needs today. So that has many levels. It's about your energy level. So maybe there will be the days where you just want to lie down and do very gentle movements, and that's perfectly fine. You're still doing something meaningful. It doesn't always have to be extreme, very dynamic, very strong. Or it might be that you were sitting around for a long time and you need to move. So maybe your routine usually is geared more towards relaxation, but one day you feel like doing something very energetic, and that's also totally fine. So I will show you how it might look like. So the first thing you want to work out is whether your energy levels to even allow you to begin in a standing position, or whether you definitely feel like lying down to begin with. So if you're not sure of that, you could even try it out. How does it feel for you to stand? Does it feel like it's almost an effort to be standing, and you're like you have to push against, it's almost like you feel that you're pushing against this resistance that is coming from your body, and in this case you know that you want to start lying down. So let's just begin with this scenario. So make your way down. And I always recommend to, instead of lying flat and still to begin with, really make your way down gradually and allow for some movement. So this first moment when you're actually starting to get the feedback from the ground, and the feedback also means a lot of support from the ground, so that you know you don't really need to use that many stabilizing muscles as you would when you were standing. This is a good moment for you to start working out what actually the body is trying to tell you. And again, it might be a power of habit that you, let's say, always start lying flat, or you, for example, from yoga practice, you have that habit. And just check how it would be to move around to begin with. To begin with a tiny bit of movement before you move into stillness and listening in. And it might feel actually very different if you allow yourself that little movement before the stillness. You can even try it out and see the difference for yourself. You don't really need to believe anything what I say, it's best if you try it for yourself. So it might be that you already start feeling like, oh, this pelvic area, it feels like maybe it's a little bit stiff or stuck, or maybe it's the lower back that feels so much better if you bring the legs closer towards you. Or maybe this part is completely fine and you're like, "Oh, actually, I feel like there's not so much mobility here in the upper body, and oh, I feel like stretching and yawning." So stretching and yawning is actually the most efficient way to release the tension from the body because it's your natural system that happens also for other animals. You might have seen it in cats and dogs. It's like a natural reset of how much tonus in the muscle there should be, which one is the most balanced one. And maybe that's where you want to yawn and sigh, and that's also all very natural responses. So try not to suppress them if they ever happen. And then you decide where you want to stay in stillness. So again, don't think of what is the right position to be in a relaxation pose. You might want to have the hands over your body, and that feels more comforting. They don't need to be by your sides. You might want to have the knees bent, or you really prefer to have them long. But don't choose the legs long just because you're used to that. And notice if that happens, whether there is like this arch happening and some tension appearing in the lower back and maybe in front of the thigh and in the groin. And if that happens, it's like you revisit it and just be honest with yourself for a moment and ask yourself, is this the more comfortable position or the one with the legs bent is the more comfortable? And go for the one that truly is more comfortable. So whichever position you have chosen for your first check, whatever it might be, that is where you want to be for a moment in stillness. And again, if you're thinking like, why would I be still if I'm supposed to move? I want to do my movement practice. Well, the movement should always arise as the consequence of coming out of stillness. So the stillness is the moment of listening. If you don't listen, if you don't pay attention, and after the movement, if you don't give your nervous system the time to process everything that happened, you're really missing out on a lot of important information. So that is when you might start noticing whether there is that edge to move or to expand, or maybe even you will start noticing that there's this, if you started with the knees bent, you might start noticing that almost on its own, almost naturally and without any effort, your hips want to rock. If you're lying on the ground, it might be that urge to stretch and yawn. And there will be a moment when you go through a body scan, and it might be quite quick, like you don't really need to do it for a very long time, but go through different parts of the body, noticing if you catch any areas of tightness, tension, or maybe some areas that you don't get much feeling of. They're almost like a blank page. So, and this might be little cues of where you might want to start. So let's say you always start with the legs, and you might do that. You might do something with the legs, some little movements there. And then once you start moving, it again gives you more feedback. So maybe today you feel like, oh, there is a particular tightness on the back of the thigh or inside of the thigh. And then this is already an information for you that, okay, maybe I will spend a little bit more time on moving in various angles, the leg, rather than doing something for the upper body. So it's good to give it like a little try, some little very simple movements to check which part of the body is speaking to you the loudest, which is kind of drawing your attention. And always, there are some movements that give you a lot of feedback. One of them is the pelvic rotation. There were lots of videos on that, so I'm not going to explain it here. You can check it in a separate video. But the pelvic tilt usually gives you a lot of information of what's going on all the way from the pelvis along the entire back to the neck. So if there is something going on there, if there is any bits that feel a little bit rusty or blocked, then you will feel it with this movement. So it's good to start with just checking where is the most sensation today, where I feel most drawn to, what feels that needs most of my attention. So you can check the upper body and the lower body all along the torso and decide which part is it for you that maybe will deserve a little bit more attention today. And this is also where you can notice whether you really want to stay with very subtle movements, with micro movements. There are so many of them. Again, you can check some of my videos that suggest some of those. Or maybe you will notice that, okay, this was just an initial like stiffness and feeling that I want some stillness, but after a while, you kind of keep increasing the range of the movement or maybe picking up the pace, and you notice that, oh no, it's all right to, I actually feel like now going a little bit farther with that. So you maybe started with a very gentle pelvic tilt, and after a while, it becomes like a full windshield wiper, for example. Right, so this is an idea. You don't start with those big movements because usually your body is not prepared for it. It will feel very jarring and it won't really do you much good. So go into that gradually. Start with smaller movements and then notice where the body wants to go. And if it doesn't want to go to this big movement, that's perfectly fine as well. And you might notice that, like, oh no, you actually don't feel like being on the back at all. And now I feel like I'm ready to go a little bit further. So you might get into a more intermediary position. So maybe not yet ready to stand up or any like big cardio thing, but maybe you want to hang out a little bit higher in this different relation to gravity when there is slightly less support from the ground. Then you can already start playing with how you distribute your weight. And maybe you have more options of moving in 3D because now the wall, sorry, the floor is not a restraint. It's not a restraint to your movements at all. You can really move in all 360 degrees in the 3D. So again, millions of options, and you might notice that you just keep traveling from one position to the other and keep moving in a kind of flowing way. It doesn't really need to be anything that you learn specifically. You could do the movement that your body is inviting you to do, or you could mix and match various things that you remember without really worrying about whether you do something right or wrong, because it's not about what you learn, it's about what you feel. So if the body tells you like, oh, like this is actually really good, then there is no reason why you would not do that. Even if it's different than from what somebody taught you or what you saw somewhere or what you used to. Even actually, I would always recommend to do some things that you are not used to as often as possible, because it takes you away from the same set movement patterns, and it's the best way to release the fascia. So plenty of options here. You could go for something more intuitive and move in various dimensions, or you could go for something you know, but even if you do something that you've done hundreds of times, it's always very useful to have this, what I call the beginner's mind, right? So really paying attention to what's going on instead of doing it mechanically, repeating it, and especially picking up the pace. See if you can do at least the first one really slowly, paying attention to what's going on. Maybe you want to go for a very short time the first time you do it, or maybe you want to stay in stillness for a while, noticing what would happen if you made just very little changes to the position of your hands or legs, so that you can check for yourself whether you're holding anywhere the tension that you don't need to hold, for example. So regardless of what you're choosing to do, whether it's your very familiar flow or something more intuitive, always give yourself also moments of pause. So you could choose something, some position that is comfortable for you. So it really doesn't matter what it is, where it would be for you. It could be anywhere, but it's important that after a moment of moving or staying in one position for a longer time, you want to come out of it and check for yourself. And maybe you notice that you're completely out of breath, or that you were holding the breath. This is also, by the way, one of the best ways of checking whether you're pushing yourself too much. Yeah. Or as you're here, you might start feeling again this urge to do something different, do something else. So there is really no one formula to do whatever you're doing. So long as you keep checking on your breath, giving yourself those pauses to work out what's going on and what has changed. And there is really no reason to do any shape and any pose just for the sake of doing this pose. So let's say if I'm here in the child's pose, I'm noticing how it feels for me. So maybe there's a little bit of a pull somewhere in the lower back, middle back, or upper back, or maybe there is a bit of a discomfort around the groin or anything, right? It might not feel yet quite so comfortable. So then I go through a couple of movements. It might be some form of a down dog. It might be moving into some spinal rotation, or it could be hip circles. It might be some sort of side opening. It could be a squat. And then I'm revisiting the child's pose, right? And that second child's pose might feel already different. It might feel a little bit more spacious or more comfortable. So then you know that what you're doing makes sense and it has an effect on you. You're not doing it mechanically for the sake of doing it. You're doing it to feel the difference for yourself. So again, depending on your energy levels, it might be that oof, that beat when you were seated, it already feels like quite strong, and you don't really feel like staying here anymore. And you're like, oof, again, I need to rest and go down and do something, maybe lying on the front now, for example. But it might be that the more you move, the more mobility you gain, the more um, up for movement you are. And then you could keep picking up the pace and doing something that would require a little bit more of muscle engagement, especially if this kind of whole body movement where all body parts would have to participate in it. And then you're finding your way to gradually go upwards in any way that works for you, whether it's coming up first, kind of waking the legs and giving them a little bit more work, right? So before you were down on the ground, the legs had more support, and then you want to wake them a little bit more so that they're ready for all those standing positions, whatever it might be for you. Or maybe what you feel is that first you need to still create a little bit more space for the back of the legs and the whole back line of the body, and then gradually you'll be able to come up. Could be that the standing position is at the end of your practice. That's when you really have already created enough of mobility and build up that stamina to go for more stronger or more energetic poses. And you can start playing with maybe the balance or something that would really strengthen the legs or whatever else it is for you. Yes? You could even move towards some sort of cardio, whatever that cardio means for you. It could be slow paced, it could be fast paced, but you've already built up towards it. Yes? But then also, there is an option that you want to start straight away from moving. So that is the case when I said you might be feeling like you're really sleepy and you feel like waking up, or you felt like you're like, so you sat for so long that you really feel like moving. And then you can start from standing. So again, even though you want to move, I would still recommend you to begin with feeling into the body, feeling the contact with the ground, giving yourself that time for the lower body to really settle so that the upper body can become more spacious and weightless. And first, always the release. So my favorite way of doing it is the bounce. There are some other ways like shaking or rotating around your own axis, but this kind of first movements are very useful because they might take away all that initial stiffness, like the bounce and the shaking. It really works very well for rehydrating the fascia. So that would be my first thing before I get to anything else. If you come, for example, from the yoga background and you feel like the first thing in the morning you do is you start with sun salutation, and you go with these big movements without any preparation whatsoever before that, it's a very big no for me. Like it's just too much. You're jumping from 0 to 10, and your body and your nervous system is like, don't do it to me. So you go with this releasing movements first, and then you go with something really gentle. You want to mobilize all your joints, even as you're standing, before you start doing bigger things. So again, you can check this video to see how you can mobilize all your joints from standing position. And once you've got all that, then you can start thinking of mobilizing your spine a couple of times, opening up the front of the body, opening the sides, And then maybe getting there slowly and not with a crazy pace to begin with towards these familiar movements that you normally go through as a part of your warm up. And don't be afraid to stay in any pose, stay longer, explore the angles that you would normally not explore. So if you always go in everything in just one kind of dimension, see how it would be to change those dimensions, to move things around in a way that you're not familiar with. And maybe you will notice, oh, I actually never ever get to that place. And that's so interesting. Always move away from pain. And if you notice that you're bracing yourself, lots of muscles are kind of suddenly turn on, even in the places that have nothing to do with the movement you're doing, then this is definitely a sign that you're going against what your body is telling you. Yes, so those are the basic rules, and then you can play with it, and every time return to how does it feel for me? Do I flow with it? Is there any jarring? Does my breath tell me that this is definitely too much? Does it feel like, yes, I want to do it, it actually feels good? Or does it feel like, I should be doing it? Like, this is my routine and I have to do it no matter how uncomfortable it feels and how, how I don't really feel like doing it. So, yeah, it should be fun. It should be pleasant. So it still can be pleasant to do something more dynamic. And usually it's pleasant because it's fun. And again, I recommend you to check my playfulness video to get the idea about that. I hope that this video has been useful for you. And if you still have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. And if you have found this video because you're struggling with chronic pain or with any chronic condition, and you're trying to find a way to tune back into your body and listen to its needs, then I will recommend you to look at and download my free audio for pain, and also sign up for the waiting list for my flagship program, Heal from Within. I will link it below. See you next time. If you suffer from chronic pain and need a tool that will help you to decrease the intensity of that sensation right at the moment when you experience it, I invite you to download for free my first aid for pain. It's a 7-minute long audio recording, which you can get from my website. I link it here and also in the description of this video.